So you've decided that you want to get your group to run an OSR or NSR style game. The first thing that I think you should do, and I would really say this before you even purchase any books, please, before you go out and start spending your hard-earned cash on all the different books for a lot of these systems, read them up online, check out reviews, previews. Often they have free versions of rules available. Avail yourselves of these resources and then do this step. You've read through the system, you think you found the one that you want to run, you haven't bought anything yet. Make a pitch to your table, assuming that you have players already. If you don't have players, then this would be something that you would write up or post somewhere to attract potential players. Write up a pitch or talk about a pitch. And in this pitch, we want to discuss not only if they're coming from 5th edition, what they'll need to know, the sorts of pitfalls potentially of your ye old OSR, old school type game, but I also want you to emphasize the positives that come with the game. What are the pitfalls? These get mentioned a lot in terms of how to potentially get your table to convert to an old school style game. The things like your player characters are going to be depowered somewhat. They're not starting off at a superheroic level. They're starting off as really a half step or step above a commoner, and then they will grow into superheroes potentially as they gain levels if they don't die first, which is probably the other part. Is there's a high level of lethality, especially at the beginning. I think this sometimes gets overplayed a little bit. The game doesn't have to be super lethal, but it is prone to, if you have a mistake, if you have a bad die roll, it can easily avalanche into death. So that's, of course, something that we want to bring up. Not a lot of abilities, not a lot of powers. Even going past the fact that, sure, you're not as powerful, you're going to look at your sheet and you're not going to see a bunch of abilities. That changes the way you play the game. These are things that you're going to want to make your players or your potential players aware of. But I also want you to emphasize what I think are the positives of play. Now, one of the big ones, and this came up when I was pitching my game to my table, was that I said, listen, I cannot spend the amount of time that it would take for me to prep and run 5th edition. It's too much work for me. If I'm going to run the system, I need to be able to fit in the prep work into my schedule. And for me, that means an old school style game. I'm very comfortable in it. The way I kind of run those games, has a very light pressure of prep on me. I can utilize a bunch of stuff like tables and generators. And because of the way the systems and my comfort with the systems, I can do that with very little overhead on my part. Now, that's important. If they want me to run the game, I'm saying I can't run a 5th edition game. Same thing for you. If you're coming to this from 5th edition or other game system, you're trying to get away from a very heavy load on your shoulders in terms of preparation, rules, etc. Make that a part of your pitch. Let your players know. Say, listen, I know we've been playing 5th edition or Pathfinder or whatever. It's too much work. I need to go to a system that's less work for me so that I can have more fun and enjoy running it. And I've determined that this is one of these old school or new school Revolution games. Let's go from there. So that's a big one, because I think players, they don't want you as a GM to feel like you're under pressure or you're not having fun doing the work. So if that is a reason why you've chosen to go for an old school style game, let them know. Second thing is, while some players may look at it and say, geez, there's not a whole lot going on my character sheet, this is going to free some other players, because you get out of what can be one of the pet peeves of a lot of gamers, is those who don't know all their player character powers. Well, guess what? If you're playing a fighter in the old school style game, you don't really have much to remember. You have a weapon, you can use it. That's it. If you have a wizard, you're probably going to have 1 or 2 or 3 spells that you know, only one of them that you've got access to. Easy peasy. Cleric, maybe a little bit more work. Thief, you've got a couple of abilities, but they're pretty self-explanatory when you can use them, when you don't, and they fit very much into your obvious kind of thiefy stuff. Not a whole lot of overhead for you as a player or for your players. Something else that they can keep in mind. Another thing is there's freedom to really attack the adventure however you like. At least the way I run my games, and I do run more of a kind of a sandbox open world game, but even if you're running modules, most of the modules in the old school style give you a lot of freedom, especially the ones that are the earlier ones, the location based ones. They expect you to be coming and going from the dungeon. They don't expect you to be going through it in one shot. They expect you to come up against a problem, potentially need to think about having to solve it, needing to retreat back to town. It gives you a lot of openness to how you want to do it. You do not have to feel like here is this path and we need to go down it. And like I've said about my game being more of a sandbox, hey, if you don't like it, don't do it. I will adjust. I will find more stuff in the wilderness for you to do. I will develop other things. If you're going to go in a sandbox route, use that as a selling point. I think a lot of players may really like the fact that really we're going to be able to come up with our own goals and pursue them. We're not going to be necessarily on a set pathway. No, it's open to you. Not only that, but if you're using a classic XP system such as XP for gold, you can let them know, hey, you don't have to fight anything. In fact, if you can get through and get all the stuff you need to do and fight nothing, totally fine. You don't lose anything that way. But you gain a lot because you could potentially get a lot more done the less fights you have. Really really making the systems like reactions and morale a part of your pitch. Look at all these mechanisms that are in place for you to talk to monsters, potentially scare them off. Really, all these tactics. Open up those tactical. Some people call it tactical infinity, but opening up all these tactical choices that you have outside of combat with how to deal with stuff. And because you don't have tons of combat abilities, I hope that players will see that, hey, there's a lot of things I can try now that don't involve me having to fight. I can have fun with my character and utilize their abilities and utilize their whatever there is on their character sheet or not, and say, hey, I don't have to fight. I can have fun with my character trying to talk to everybody or trying to sneak around everybody or trying to set a trap or an ambush or just evading them. These are all fine and good choices, and depending on your party, these may be selling points to them. The big thing I want you to take away from this is when you are pitching your game, I don't want you to just focus on the negative qualities from a player standpoint, because there are some negative only in the sense, I almost want to put it in quotes, negative only in the sense that from the depowerment of the player's standpoint, they are less powerful, they are more prone to dying, they do have less stuff. However, they gain a lot in return. You could talk about all the choices that they have. This really, I think, of OSR, old school type gaming, is getting closer and closer to that almost infinity of choices, that real player agencies. You can really do anything and go anywhere that you want to. And if you embrace that as a GM and you pass on your players, that really may be something that they might attach themselves to. Some of it is going to be very player specific. And of course, if you know your players, then you can tailor that to them. For myself, I went to my players, I asked them, well, what kind of campaign do you want? And it being that I was using an OSR system that I knew was going to be very light on prep, I could go through this and really build that campaign quickly and easily amongst us as a table without having to worry about tons and tons of mechanics or balance or other elements. I could just say, okay, that's what we're going to do and go. And if they change their minds, it's no sweat off my brow. We can go into another direction. That's also fine. But that was, for me, read through your OSR or NSR game of choice, figure out really what are the draws for you, and then use that enthusiasm to communicate that to your party. Make sure to bring up the stuff that is going to be impactful to them as players. I hammer into my players all the time about things like, hey, you are not immune from death. You guys think you're on a grand quest. That's great, but you could die in a moment. So take care. I always reiterate it. And I definitely brought it up in terms of this session 0, this campaign pitch, this game pitch. However, don't make it just that, because I think from a player's standpoint, even coming with something like 5th edition, I think there's a lot to be gained by at least trying out an old school style game. Let me know how it goes for you. But remember, please try to do this before you buy all the books, because there's a lot of pressure if you have spent $40, $50, $60, $100 on books and then your players decide, nah, I don't want to. So do the pitch first, place your order second. Hopefully you get everybody on board. I'm going to have more of these videos talking about other elements of starting your first game, but I wanted to start with the pitch. It's important. Give it a try. Game on. Talk to you later.